Ursula von der Leyen lives to fight another day as President of the European Commission. She survived a vote of no confidence orchestrated by a far-right faction in the EU Parliament. But are her troubles really over? As the vote reveals divisions within the EU and questions remain over whether she can lead it effectively. Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady. Now, the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has batted away a rare no-confidence vote, but not without political bruises. One Parliament Vice President said some MEPs are determined this will be her absolute last chance to lead. So, why is the German politician facing so much pressure, and how much is her grip on power weakening?
EU Chief Ursula von der Leyen survives a rare no-confidence vote in the European Parliament, tabled by a far-right wing.
And it is rejected.
Von der Leyen defended her record as the EU Commission's leader.
I remember all of those times when it could feel that there was no light at the end of the tunnel. But I've also not forgotten what we have achieved together. How a vaccine was developed in record time, thanks to European science.
The vote was initiated by far-right MEP Jorge Pipere. He accused von der Leyen of a lack of transparency over her refusal to disclose text messages she had sent to the Pfizer CEO for a multi-billion euro COVID-19 vaccine deal.
In the last 6 years, the Commission has taken away, in an abusive manner, powers of the Member States and ignored the European Parliament in its major decisions. The decision-making process has become opaque and discretionary and raises fears of abuse and corruption.
In response, von der Leyen had fighting words for Pipere.
And there's a choice here. We can follow Mr. Pipere down his world of conspiracies and alleged sinister plots by what he calls Brussels, or we can clearly call this out for what it is. Another crude attempt to drive a wedge between our institutions, between the pro-Europeans, pro-democratic forces of this House.
But now, with the EU moving more to the far right, how long can von der Leyen hold on to power?
Well, let's meet our guests in Berlin. We have Edward Knudsen. He is a doctoral researcher in international relations. That's at the University of Oxford. In Gothenburg, in Sweden, we have Gunilla von Hall. She is foreign affairs correspondent at the Swedish daily newspaper Svenska Dagbladet. In Brussels, Dharmendra Kanani. He is chief spokesman for Friends of Europe. And also in Brussels, we have Christine Anderson. She's a German member of the European Parliament. You're all very welcome to this roundtable. Christine, to you first. Your compatriot, Ursula von der Leyen, how wounded is she after that vote, do you think?
Well, it's hard to say at this point. So she did take a beating, so much is clear. And she did lose the absolute majority in the House. She would have needed 361 votes. It was one vote short. However, quite astonishing also was there were quite a number of MEPs that didn't even cast their ballot at this point. They just, did not vote on that. And I think you could kind of add these to the no votes. So, and there were 178 something no votes. So it remains to be seen, but she once again had to go to the left and the Green groups to make them some kind of an offer. So remaining in power to her is becoming more and more costly, and rightly so, and because she's not serving in the best interest of the citizens.
Well, Dharmendra, just come in on that. She will look at those numbers, von der Leyen. Do you think she will be worried about the next couple of years then?
this vote is just an early shot in the bows about what is likely to happen in the future. And, it's quite interesting, your commentary about how wounded is she. Because I think in the media, and this is not a criticism of any of you, we like a bit of drama. There has to be a heroine and a devil and someone who's actually cast us aside. And there's something about this is more serious because this is about what is happening more strategically in a very organized way across Europe and globally in terms of malevolent actors trying to undermine liberal democracy. That's what's happening right now, and that's what we're seeing a sign of. So whether she's wounded or not is neither here or there. The lesson in this is for her not to do dodgy deals with the right, but also the lesson here is for liberal Democrats, especially those in the left, center right, to get the grip and realize that something's a rot in the system, and rather than playing the politics of the past, begin to play the politics of the future, where the right is far more organized, far more credible in terms of their messaging, and are able to, I suppose, pick into the vulnerabilities of people in the way that most of the left and the centre are simply complacent about.
Edward, that's an excellent point, isn't it? That her colleague and compatriot Manfred Weber, the German Christian Democrat politician, he says this motion was down to the work of Putin's puppets. That's how he described the people that Dharmendra is alluding to, Putin's puppets.
Well, I'm obviously not sympathetic to the Putin's influence, especially in Europe among the far right. I do wonder if this rhetoric is sort of running out of steam a little bit, right? Where every negative thing that happens inside a liberal democracy is somehow the fault of Russia or China. I mean, it's been going on for a while now, and it seems like I don't know how much more juice really there is left to squeeze out of this type of rhetoric. Instead, I think a lot of these, countries and liberal democracies, including, a supranational organization like the EU, needs to look a bit more internally. And I think the center needs to be a bit more critical of what it's actually doing that might arouse the anger of constituents, rather than saying every time there's dissatisfaction with the political center, it must be the result of an external threat. And so I wouldn't expect this continued kind of use of the sort of Russia scaremongering to sort of dispel all critiques of existing leadership. I don't think that's really going to work anymore.
So Gunilla von der Leyen has...
May I just jump in here real quickly?
Yeah, of course.
I mean, if they're going to consider this, to be once again Russian influence, we've know that Russia. But I mean, just look at the merits of our criticism. So we have the EU courts of auditors. We have the European ombudswoman. They both pretty much attested Ursula von der Leyen. No, she did not comply to EU law. She should have released those text messages. The European People's Prosecutor's Office is investigating her and the EU Commission for corruption. So what does that have anything to do with, whether or not what Putin is doing? Has nothing to do with that.
Well, Christine von der Leyen will deny any wrongdoing whatsoever. I'll come to you in a second, Dharmendra. I want to bring Gunilla back in. Gunilla, tell me, having survived this motion of no confidence, von der Leyen's big problem now is getting the EU budget over the line. Just tell me, how difficult a process do you think that will be? 27 member states need to sign off on it.
Well, this is going to be more difficult than before this vote because she's definitely weakened, and she has a lot of things to balance now. I mean, she had the Socialists and the Greens supporting her by not voting, and then they're going to ask for concessions. They're going to push her in direction of wanting more on climate change, on social funds, and so forth. And at the same time, she has pressure on increasing for defense needs, as we know. So it's really going to be pressure from both sides, and it's going to be an uphill for her with this budget. This has really complicated things for her, and also about her credibility with the whole saga about the text messages. That is also something that's going to stay as a shadow over her because they still haven't been made official. So it's still going to be an issue of how transparent is the Commission. And this is weighing on her, and this is also going to influence, I think, her work on getting the budget approved or getting the budget going at all, because I think it's going to be tough for her now. Everything has changed for her. She's not as strong as she used to be. She's not out and over, but she's definitely weakened.
Dharmendra, just talk to me about these text messages then. So these were
Absolutely.
sent during COVID times to
Indeed.
one of the recipients and senders was a boss of a big pharma company.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But I want to say, just be clear, I want to make some points clear that in my opening remarks. It wasn't about the fact that I'm being an apologist for von der Leyen or this is all just Putin. I'm saying there's a problem with the centre and the left in terms of reaching their voters and making them trust them in a way that the right are doing better. But going to this point, it's interesting that my colleagues have not come out and said, what about Huawei? What about a vice president of the parliament that was caught with money being put into a bag? Suddenly, that was not an issue of trust or the institution falling apart. But here we are, when all of you should know that no country in the wide West, if you could say, was coming out of the COVID environment pure. We know from the COVID inquiry in the UK, ministers are doing text left, right and centre. France, Belgium, Germany, Italy. It was a crisis that most political leaders had never encountered. They didn't even have the governance in place, and they had to think, well, what do? We survive society. We make sure society survives. What can we do to create safety? The lesson in that was any scenario planning didn't work. And basically, most people were rabbits in front of headlights. What we need to think about is, at that moment in time, there wasn't a leader in Europe that wasn't texting and having conversations to make sure their society didn't fall apart. And suddenly this becomes a reflection of a president, which I'm not apologizing for, but actually saying, let's get a grip. There was a moment in time and moment in history, most politicians didn't know what they were doing.
Edward, to you.
At the same time, once again, I kind of have to jump in here. At the same time, you do have to acknowledge the way that was all, how they went about doing that, the main focus on getting these so-called vaccines, that was the sole focus. Anything else, there would have been other measures that could have been taken, treatment suggestions, whatever. They were completely disregarded. It was labeled disinformation, misinformation, and what have you not. So the sole focus on these despicable mRNA injections, which at best were worthless,
Well, Christine, they saved lives. There's no doubt they saved lives. Come on, Christine, they saved lives.
That is
it's
the
really
reason
important
why
that
people
politicians
do
are
want
paid by the
to have
Hang on, Dharmendra, let her finish. Let her finish. Christine, just finish. Make your point.
Yeah, that was my point pretty much. Why was the sole focus on these worthless mRNA injections, which in a lot of cases even led to death? Why was the sole focus on that? We're talking billions and billions and billions of taxpayers' money that we shoved down these pharmaceutical companies' throats. And now the risks, the taxpayer once again is left with the risks. What are the big pharma companies, what are they doing? I want answers. I want Ursula von der Leyen to release those text messages. I want to know what went on behind the scenes with her buddy, Albert Bourla, the CEO of Pfizer. And the taxpayers have a right to get those
Thanks,
answers.
Christine. I want to bring Edward in. Edward, hang on, Dharmendra. I want to bring Edward in. Edward,
Okay.
I mean, we're not even sure these text messages still exist. They may well have been deleted.
Exactly.
But Ursula von der Leyen's not
Wouldn't
going
be
to
the first
release them,
time.
Edward, is she? Let Edward speak, please.
Yeah, I don't think so. And I mean, you can see it kind of just becoming like a buzzword, right? Like, release the text messages. It reminds me of Hunter Biden's laptop, et cetera. And I think this whole thing really, really does speak to some of the danger of this moment, which is that if there isn't sort of trusted leadership among the center, then it actually opens the door to the sort of only outlet for people's anger becomes through the far right. And we just heard, completely baseless vaccine skepticism. And that's completely not what we need in this day and age. But the problem that you have is, von der Leyen, like there is grounds for concern there. Like when she was German defense minister, there were a lot of sort of shady dealings, consulting contracts that didn't seem quite up to par, up to standards. And in the commission, there's been other issues of transparency. And so if you allow problems that might seem legitimate to fester, but the center is a little bit too hesitant to criticize itself, you then open the door for that anger to be channeled solely through the far right and allow really dangerous ideas to take root. And I think that's what we're seeing now. It's a very delicate moment because, like you said, you don't want to defend, you don't want to overly defend von der Leyen, but you also don't want to give oxygen to kind of conspiratorial thinking that opposes her. And so the existing powers and centrist parties need to find a way to toe that line delicately.
Gunilla, I want to come to you next. Just talk to me about Ukraine and von der Leyen's support of Ukraine and ultimately their ambitions to become members of the European Union.
Well, there she's been very outspoken, and she's been so critical against Putin, as we know, and Russia, and on Ukraine. That is quite sensitive though, because she's welcoming Ukraine, and Ukraine should be welcoming the EU and so forth. And this is a problem in EU right now because Europe is a bit split on how Ukraine should really be integrated into Europe and into the EU. So here I think that she has to be a bit careful because she risks rubbing the wrong way if she's too forceful in saying that Ukraine should become a member of the EU. And it is good, of course, that she's critical on Russia and Putin and so forth and the full-scale invasion in Ukraine. But it has to be, she's risking a little bit by being so one-sided in a way sometimes about Ukraine and Russia and not showing any critical view on what is needed for Ukraine to actually join the EU. But that also made her very popular. We have to remember, like in my country, in Sweden, in the Nordic countries, she has become popular because she's been so critical on Russia and pro-Ukraine and helping Ukraine to be integrated in the EU, even in NATO in the longer term. In other countries like Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, and the Nordic countries, that is giving her popularity.
Thanks, Gunilla.
I just wanted to make a point.
Yep.
I just wanted to make a point about the mRNA vaccines that were mentioned. That we should remember that they have probably saved more lives than actually killed people. So that is it's very important to remember the mRNA vaccines have also been important, even though one could always have a critical eye towards the pharmaceuticals.
Thanks, Gunilla. Dharmendra, I want to bring you in on just what we're seeing really is just how fragmented European Union politics is right now. I mean, you wouldn't want to be von der Leyen for all the tea in China, really, would you?
Absolutely not. When you think about it, she comes in her first mandate and is slapped in the face with a global pandemic. Then you've got an energy crisis. Then you have a war. And now you have got everything else that's going on, Gaza, etc. And so I think she's the only president in modern history that's had this number of crises that she's had to manage simultaneously and across the piece. And with a fragmenting Europe, that's actually, for the first time, we have a significant minority of the right. But on your point about Ukraine, Enda, I think I'm listening to what was just been said by the colleague in Sweden. I just say, why would you be balanced when innocent people are being killed every day and someone has broken international law and invaded a sovereign country? Why would you have to be balanced about that? In the same way, we have a corrupt leader in Israel committing genocide. Why do we need to be balanced about that statement? So I might came across as being rather crude and naive, but sometimes naivety can be the chrysalis of change. But on this point here, why should we be balanced and not forthright in our support for Ukraine when, since Second World War, in peacetime history, we have a war on in our neighborhood? And what we do know through intelligence reports, and people have, we've had CIA, others coming out, heads officials saying, Putin is committing special measures across Europe. What that means is sowing dissent, cyber attacks, having people create kind of, riots, etc. We need to wake up to that reality. But going back to her, and my only message here is, she really does need to get a grip about who she should trust and work with. And in the context that we find ourselves right now, she's better doing a deal with the Greens, the Liberals, and the centre-right than feeling vulnerable, because what she needs to demonstrate is strength in her mandate and believe and do what she needs to do, which is do the right thing by people in Europe. And most of them will trust her if she continues to operate in a way that they can see that she means what she says and she does what she means. That's what's important here for her.
So Christine, von der Leyen needs to get a grip, in Dharmendra's words.
Yeah, she does need to get a grip, but in a different way than as it was just described. I mean, you know, so there's talks about that people will trust her. The truth is, people do not trust her. And if it were up actually to the peoples within the member states, they would have never elected this person in the first place. The only thing that is protecting Ursula von der Leyen is that she is being elected in the EU Parliament. In her first mandate, she, various gifts to the Green with a whole Green Deal.
Von der Leyen will deny that completely, but Dharmendra, just come back in on that briefly.
This is part of this is the playbook, unfortunately, of yourself, my colleague in the politics, where you come from. It's a plug and play. You come out with notices about gifts. The Green Deal isn't a gift. It's the most significant investment in tackling climate change. We need to act now. We've at the highest levels. No, let me finish. We are having extreme weather conditions.
Christine, let him finish. Let him finish.
In your own country and most of the southeastern and southwestern Europe is suffering the highest temperatures ever. And you think that the Green Deal is a gift? She did none of those deals. She did the right thing, as any leader should have done, is to make sure we are safe in the internet and digitalization, put money in where it matters to make sure people can transition to a green situation, but don't punish the poorest who cannot make adaptations.
Thanks,
so
Dharmendra.
Think differently about how you make that happen.
Thanks, Dharmendra. I just want to come back to Christine. Right. Christine, hang on. You're denying the temperatures we're seeing in Europe right now. Seriously?
I'm not denying anything, and I'm not denying even climate change. Climate's always been changing. What I'm saying, however, is to believe that mankind has such an impact on the so-called climate change that is man-made. This is just hubris. Because the point of the matter is, and that no one even never says that, they're all bashing down on carbon dioxide and we need to cut carbon dioxide. But it's not carbon dioxide that drives the temperature. It's the other way around. So we are actually cutting carbon dioxide, but it will have no effect on possibly rising temperatures.
Thanks, Christine. Thanks, Christine. I want to bring Edward back in now, talking about climate policy. Von der Leyen wants the European Union to reduce its carbon footprint by, 90% by the year 2040. How's she going to get agreement on this, Edward, when we're hearing some of the skepticism about climate?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously the dissent on this are just basically, I think, another case of just completely misinformed science, you could call it, is one issue. But I think really it's another way in which, like, actually getting back to my earlier point, is that the center really hasn't kind of lived up to its own ambitions. It's all of these, the Green Deal and so on, like the kind of laudable goals, but the issue for a lot of this is really financing. And so it's really, in a lot of ways, actually the sort of like overcommitment to centrism and caution in the Commission and other European capitals that poses the greatest risk, because I know the European Union has actually been kind of slowly backtracking on some of its climate goals. So what's needed here is a lot more kind of boldness, and I think it's fair to just completely disregard completely misinformed climate skepticism. In the same way it's the right thing to do to disregard vaccine skepticism.
Talk to me about disunity then at the heart of the European Union. Ursula von der Leyen has a huge job on her hands now.
She does. It's really an uphill for her. And just to come back, like what I was saying before, my colleague said on Ukraine and Russia, of course, her strength is that she's so critical on Russia and on Putin for the full-scale invasion in Ukraine. But she has an issue. How is she going to deal? We have Hungary, we have Slovakia, we have extreme right movement. We have a stronger and stronger right movement in Europe and in the EU. And how is she going to deal with that? It's a lot of conspiracy theories running around. And this is really, this is creating more of a polarization. And we see that in my country, in Sweden too, where the rightist movement is getting stronger and stronger. And there's a lot of a lot of discussions about that, and a lot of polarization that we see developing because of the rightist movements growing in strength. And she has that in the heart of the EU, and that is the big issue, the big challenge for the future, I think. This is where she's going to have a problem and challenge with the cooperation. How do you even cooperate with some of these very far-right voices?
Christine, just final point to you, Christine. Hang on. Christine, let me ask the question. How did you vote then in the no confidence motion, dare I ask?
How did I vote?
Yeah.
Well, certainly against Ursula von der Leyen. I mean, it's a roll call vote. That's like the other thing, right? It should have been actually a secret vote. But they chose, it's actually in the statutes, we cannot even have a secret vote on a motion of censure. That's another safety net they kind of, put in there so that the individual members, can be subjugated to, pressure from their group leaders or whatever. But I mean,
or you
there
could
is
call it
only
accountability.
one vote that I could have cast. And when are people? I mean, you're all talking about right wing movements and the right wing conservatives. They're grown in numbers. Yes, we have grown in numbers. But when are you ever going to ask the question? Why is that? What is happening? What is going on? Well, I'll answer that question for you because we make sense. We actually advocate for common sense, and the people are beginning to realize that.
Thanks, Christine. I want to make a final point. I want to get a final point in from Dharmendra. Dharmendra, I think one thing that's very clear from this discussion is Ursula von der Leyen has a lot of work on her hands.
No, but Enda, if you imagine sitting in her seat when COVID happened and COVID took over the whole of Europe, suddenly they're getting a phone call that Putin's invaded Ukraine. It couldn't get harder, really, could it? But the issue here is, on the one hand, it's good that you're doing this on this show, that you're bringing the likes of politicians of the one that has spoken, that is basically to expose that when I say this with respect, when you say that you're doing a great deal, what you are actually doing is you reduce complexity to simple solutions and you lie. You lie about the solutions that are available and then you feed disinformation.
Thanks, Edward, Gunilla, Dharmendra and Christine. A feisty roundtable there. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Just search for Roundtable TRT World. But for now, from me, Enda Brady, and all the team here, goodbye and thank you for watching.